To start with the panel, I would like to invite on stage to say the opening words Mr. Abraham Neto, the CEO of AmCham Brazil. Thank you. Dear Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Ms. Marina Silva, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury of the United States, Janet Yellen, the Ambassador of the United States in Brazil, Ms. Elizabeth Bagley. I hereby greet the other authorities from Brazil and from the U.S. Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great honor for AmCham Brazil to welcome the ministers for this conversation on economy and environment, addressing both Brazil and the United States in this symbolic building in the light of the celebration of the 200 years of the diplomatic relations between Brazil and the United States. In 1824, the United States was one of the first countries to acknowledge Brazil's independence. And ever since then, these two young nations have developed close relations, developing this prosperous partnership with benefits for both economies and for both societies. Beyond the economy, these 200 years have offered, a fertile ground to promote exchanges in the fields of culture, education, science, technology, and environment, amongst so many other areas. That is a true win-win relationship. In this 200-year journey, the United States have consolidated as the key trading partner for Brazil, if we take into account the flow of goods, services, and investments. The North American market accounts for the first destination of Brazilian exports for industrial goods and high technology products. Last year, for example, we had a record of virtually $30 billion in the exports from Brazil to the United States. That's a powerful reminder on how we have this quite relevant and dynamic relationship. And Brazil significantly contributes as well for the North American economy, providing feedstock, products, services. I think it's working better now with this microphone. Well, Brazil contributes significantly as well for the North American economy. We provide products and services, highly important inputs. And the American exports to Brazil support the creation of 130,000 jobs in the labor market. And the United States is the key destination for Brazilian companies that decide to invest in other countries. They invest $30 billion in information technology sector and also steel, the aircraft industry, renewable energy, among others. Another highlight is the strength of the business relationship between both countries. And AmCham, and I have the privilege of chairing this entity, and it's a great example of this strength. We've been in operation for 105 years in Brazil, and we have become the largest American trading chamber outside the United States and the largest multi-sector entity in Brazil. So we have Brazilian roots, we are an American chamber, but we use the green and yellow colors. So we have great reasons to celebrate, and we have so many reasons to be proud of. We have to look forward with ambition, pragmatism, and a sentiment of opportunity. Madam Secretary was talking about the collective challenges that the world faces today. So we have unprecedented climate emergency. the production chains should be more resilient. There's also the importance of strengthening democracy. And there's also the need to leverage the benefits of this unheard of a wave of disruptive technologies. When we take into account the priorities and the interests of both Brazilian and American administrations, we do realize the synergy, the sharing of interests that really enable our cooperation to become even more relevant. And definitely the priorities, they are addressed more easily. We are going to be more successful if both countries work together. We are global leaders in the environment sector. Both countries are pioneers in the energy transitioning to a low-carbon economy. They're key countries to fight against climate changes, and they play key roles to ensure the food supply to the entire world. And also the values and the history that we share turn Brazil and the U.S. into reliable partners to strengthen their production chains. As we had the opportunity of discussing late last year in the CEO Forum for Brazil and the U.S. with the Geraldo Alckmin, the Vice President of Brazil, and Dina Raymond, the Secretary of Trade. So, Ms. Secretary Yellen, Ms. Marina, thank you for being here. We hope that the convergence of interest between both countries inspire a new chapter of great prosperity for our relations. We count on your leadership, and you may count on the business sector and the support of the American Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brown. I would like to invite the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Madam Marina Silva. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Initially, I would like to thank God for being here, for enabling all of us to be here. It's a great joy, it's a great satisfaction to hold this important event. We have this meeting that is highly strategic for Brazil, that is the G20 meeting. Madam Janet Yellen, Mr. Marcelo Margon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to be able to participate in this event, and I really regret the Minister of Finance, Fernando Haddad. Because of health issues, he couldn't be here today as he had planned to be. So it is a great honor to welcome Ms. Yellen here in our country because of this important meeting with ministers, the Ministers of Finance participating in the G20. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last year, we have been gearing efforts to strengthen the bilateral relations between Brazil and the United States under the leadership of President Lula and President Biden. I would like to acknowledge the decision of the American government to provide funds for the Amazon Fund, as well as the partnership for the right of workers, men and women. And this has been established by our presidents in September 2023. There are so many historical similarities and the similarities that we see in the economies, both in Brazil and the United States. We are the two largest economies of the American continent. We are the two most populous countries, and our societies have debts to be cleared. by important sectors that were left at the margin throughout our histories. Moreover, we do share values and strategic objectives like upholding democracy, dignified work, and fighting against climate change. This is why our presidents have classified this bilateral relation as being a vital relationship, a long-lasting relationship. We do share the idea that we cannot serve the demands of social and economic development of our population without acknowledging that our rich natural assets should be used with wisdom and with sustainability to benefit our societies. However, there is a question that we must answer. If there is, scientific knowledge on the severity of the climate issue, there must be technical capacity, there must be human resources and also financial resources. So what is lacking? What is lacking for us to accelerate the transformation towards the right direction, towards the direction of a new model to promote social and economic development, a model that is capable of promoting the appropriate changes. So this is the reason why the ecological transformation plan in Brazil has been led by the Minister of the Finance, with the purpose of including Brazil in the international scenario, integrating economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection, everything in a single equation. In the environmental area, we are fighting against deforestation. We are using our climate ambition. We are working, committed to protecting indigenous peoples. And we are also developing new environmental instruments to provide incentives to preservation and to the legal security that is required to promote investments. Our engagement in reducing deforestation and in controlling illegal activities in the Amazon has shown expressive results in the last year. So we were able to reduce deforestation by 50%, preventing the release of 250 million tons of CO2. And the commitment of President Lula is having zero deforestation in all of the biomes by 2030. We are also creating mechanisms that will incentivize the maintenance of the forests. We have the bioeconomics policy, low-carbon agriculture, green reindustrialization, and sustainable infrastructure. To that purpose, we've been mobilizing with urgency the public and the private investments. For example, there have been some announcements showing the partnership between the Brazilian government and the World Bank and the Investment Bank to develop innovative mechanisms that will leverage the economic development on a sustainable basis. President Lula wants to host COP30. We don't want to be just the host of an additional important international event. We are willing to build our agenda that will show the commitments to be taken on by Brazil in line with the global target of preventing temperature increases, limiting it to 1.5 degrees. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Janet Yellen, I do believe that here we have brought together the best conditions for us to inaugurate a portal of opportunities in our bilateral relations. Our teams should look for synergies under the Ecological Transformation Plan with the Climate Working Group, exploring the carbon market, the sustainable finance, the protection protection of forests, and also the protection of supply chains, as well as investments so that our cities can become more resilient, more sustainable, so as to speed up this just and inclusive transition for everyone. I would like to reinforce, concluding, the important role to be played by the private sector, especially the contribution of AmCham Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marina. Now we invite for his initial remarks our Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, Ms. Janet Yellen.
Good morning, and thank you to the American Chamber of Commerce and to President Nato for hosting this event. I send my best wishes for a speedy recovery to Minister Adaji, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, and I want to thank Minister Silva for being here. Minister Silva, you have spent your career leading on climate, and I'm glad we have the chance to discuss with those here the strength of the economic relationship between our two countries, and specifically opportunities for collaboration on climate. This year, the United States and Brazil celebrate 200 years of formal diplomatic relations. Our strong economic relationship is founded on a deep and long history of engagement and shared values, and bolstered by the current strength of each of our economies. Over the past 3 years, the Biden administration's economic policies have helped drive an historic recovery. U.S. GDP growth is strong, and inflation has come down significantly. We also have a strong labor market. Our unemployment rate is near historic lows. More Americans are working than before the pandemic, and real wages are up. So we are now focusing on growing our economy for the long term. A trifecta of legislation, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, is fueling investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, and clean energy. Since the start of the administration, private sector companies have announced over $600 billion in clean energy and manufacturing investments. And I believe that Brazil's private sector, represented by those of you in this room, can drive similarly strong growth and employment outcomes here. As we're working to do in the United States, it's vital that Brazil create the conditions for the private sector to invest and grow. And I congratulate Minister Haddad and Brazil on accomplishing a truly historic tax reform. This will improve the ease of doing business here, including for American companies looking to invest. There's a huge opportunity for Brazil to become more integrated in global value chains, and the United States will be a strong partner to Brazil in this effort. Steps such as addressing high external tariffs and progressing on the adoption of OECD codes and standards could make Brazil even more attractive to foreign investors, creating additional opportunities for both of our economies. Brazil is also particularly well positioned to benefit from the global transition to carbon neutrality. You have the advantage of an energy grid that is already largely based on renewables. which will be a major asset as economies around the world increasingly internalize the cost of carbon in production. You also have the vitally important carbon sink of the Amazon basin. There are, in fact, significant opportunities for the private sector, including American companies, across Brazil's green economy, from further fueling its clean energy transition to investing in its plant-based foods and cosmetic industries. I'm very glad that the Treasury Department and Fazenda are actively exploring how we can partner on much of this. The United States is also deeply engaged in multilateral initiatives in this region alongside regional partners. Brazilian President Yellen has been leading important and comprehensive reform across the Inter-American Development Bank Group, including to position the institution to better support the growth of the region's private sector to fuel the green transition. The United States, alongside other shareholders, looks forward to completing a capital increase for the IDB's private sector arm next month. With that, again, I want to thank you all for being here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Ministra, muitíssimo obrigado.
Dear ministers, dear Madam Secretary, thank you for the words. So we'll begin with the panel. And he is now speaking English.
With a must question on the state of the U.S. economy. So if you could please share with us your outlook for the U.S. economy in 2024, and if can the U.S. sustain the momentum of 2023 with another year of tight monetary policy? What are the risks the economy is facing?
Well, starting with where we are, the U.S. economy has been growing strongly, 3.1% growth in 2023. Our job market is strong, and we're making important progress in lowering inflation and lowering key costs that American families face. Inflation is already down significantly, partly due to the actions by the Fed, and we remain committed to bringing it down further. And importantly, as we make progress, what we're now seeing is that wages are growing faster than prices, and so the purchasing power of American households is increasing. In fact, the median American worker can now buy the same basket of goods as in 2019 and have $1,400 left over to save or spend. There were forecasters who predicted a recession in 2023, and they turned out to be completely wrong. I think that partly reflects the fact that the inflation we experienced, along with many other countries, importantly reflected disruptions from the pandemic to supply chains, and those disruptions have gradually now receded. Consumers remain in a healthy state. They're buying more, and we're seeing really a record number of new businesses, 16 million over the last 3 years. And starting up new businesses, I think, reflects confidence in the future. So as I look forward to the remainder of this year, I'm very optimistic about the U.S. economy. I think we will continue to grow, perhaps not as strongly as in 2023, but I expect solid growth. The labor market, I believe, will remain strong, and inflation has already come down a great deal, and I believe it's going to come down more. Now, of course, there are risks, but to me, the outlook is for more of the same.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ministra Marina, a gente viu no
Marina
primeiro
Silva.
ano de governo
In the first year of administration, we had, sharp results on the environmental area. So
pedir a gentileza
I would like to kindly, you can please share with us
as próximas prioridades
the
do
next
governo na
priorities of Lula's administration in the environment and climate field. Thank you for your question. Well, first, I would like to give you an introduction. The environmental challenges of Lula's administration, this has been, based on the strategic objective to fight against inequalities, strengthen our democracy, and create a new cycle of prosperity. These are the three pillars that support the social and environmental policies that we develop. Within the policies, we'll definitely have to tackle our major challenge to reach, zero deforestation in 2030. That's a huge challenge. So as I said before, we began by the Amazon. We do have a plan for the Savannah. We are now working on the Pampa region, the Pantanal, and all of that should result in actions that will enable us to reach 2025, leading by example, as I usually say, reducing the emissions of CO2, and at the same time creating the foundations so that we have an NDC that is in line with our mission, as we call it, the 1.5 C mission. The Earth temperature should not exceed this increase as established by scientific data. Of course, we have to fight against the inequalities and create a new cycle of prosperity. So we support bioeconomics. Therefore, it's very much important that we consider the creation of new products, new materials, the opening of the markets for the new products, and the investments that are innovative. Because we understand that we cannot fight against deforestation with just command and control. You have to remove the illegalities. You have to prevent what is illegal and then replace illegality by something that will generate income, that will generate jobs to improve people's lives. And we still have other plans. I mean, having investments in infrastructure. We have the adaptation agenda, but also a mitigation agenda for climate change that requires basic sanitation and investments so that we fulfill our targets. We do have an adaptation plan. We have 15 different programs oriented to adaptation, an additional 8 programs for the mitigation agenda. And we are going to follow through and address the priorities, also in the urban spaces. When we think about the environment, we are reminded of the forests and the biomes, but more than 80% of our population lives in the cities, so there must be public policies to improve the quality of life in cities, creating resilient cities. We are gearing efforts now vis-à-vis the Ministry of the Cities, the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Mines and Energy, making investments similar to those that are made by the U.S., fostering the use of renewable energies based on this business perspective, which is highly important, but also based on investments that can be made by people, by the citizens. So it is an environmental agenda, but above all, it is a sustainable development agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Minister.
Still
He's speaking
on the
English.
U.S. economy, but now moving into some of the domestic initiatives that you already mentioned. We see that the Biden administration has sought to propel growth in key sectors with a series of enormous legislative packages. Inflation Reduction Act, infrastructure law are just two of the most significant ones. So how are U.S. businesses responding to that? And are they making use of these programs, of the $600 billion that you mentioned?
So let me say we're very pleased with the response that we've seen to these programs and the CHIPS and Science Act, which provides for tremendous investments in semiconductors. The uptake has been really strong. In the case of the bipartisan infrastructure law, it has catalyzed more than $350 billion in projects across a range of sectors, improving roads, bridges, broadband, and clean energy. Some of the money there is going to create electric battery charging stations all over the country. On the Inflation Reduction Act, which is an absolutely historic piece of legislation to address climate change, it is an enormous piece of legislation. Firms are looking for certainty or greater certainty about exactly how it'll work and what will be eligible. The Treasury Department has been racing. We've produced 50 pieces of guidance to provide clarity for investors on most of the pivotal clean energy provisions with respect to electric vehicles, hydrogen, production credit, and other things. We've seen, in response to that, historic investments across the United States in things ranging from EV assembly plants, battery factories, semiconductor fabs, and much more. And importantly, we want to make sure that the transition in the United States is just and that opportunities flow to areas of the country that have been historically left behind or are invested, have been the focus of fossil fuels. And what we see already is that disproportionately these investments are going to those communities. And I'd say more broadly, if you look at all three pieces of legislation, they're really part of a Biden agenda that I've called modern supply-side economics. And modern supply-side economics is really about making smart, targeted public investments that will catalyze activity by the private sector and serve to expand our country's productive capacity and to create good jobs in dynamic sectors for the future. Importantly, many of these investments also have positive global spillovers. We expect them to lower the cost of renewables or create new opportunities for supply chains for inputs like critical minerals. And as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. strong economic performance itself has positive spillovers for global growth.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Ministra, agora gostaria de ouvir talvez uma pergunta parecida,
Ms.
mas
Minister,
olhando a
maybe a
perspectiva
similar question,
do
but
lado brasileiro,
from the point of view of the
como tem se
Brazilian
dado
side,
a
how
relação
do
entre
you
economia
see the
e meio
relationship
ambiente
between the
e
economy
como
and the
o
environment?
Ministério do Meio
And
Ambiente
how
tem
does the
trabalhado em
Ministry of
conjunto
the
com o Ministério
Environment
da
has been
Fazenda
working together with the
para
Ministry of
estimular
Finance
uma economia de
to
baixo carbono no
encourage
Brasil?
a low-carbon economy in Brazil? Well, an interesting point that myself and Minister Haddad, we always talk about. It's the first time in the Brazilian history that we were able to find great synergy between the economic and the environmental areas. The ecological transformation plan is being coordinated by the Ministry of Finances, and for sure this is the best place to develop this plan, because from there it may become multidisciplinary. I don't know how they're going to translate this word, because she means that it has become transversal. But our work has been very beneficial. It's not by chance that I'm here also trying to cover for the absence of Minister Haddad. He is unreplaceable. In the World Economic Forum, it has been the same effort in a display that President Lula's willingness is that the environmental policy becomes multidisciplinary. The PPA, our action plans promoted by our Minister of the economic development, 50 actions have sustainability in its core. So what we are saying through that is that we are trying to implement from the practical view all of our principles. Another question in which we have been working with, it's the access of the ecological transformation plan, how to organize this in the area of sustainable finances. Yesterday, we established an important partnership with the World Bank, with the IBD and other sectors that have been working strongly in this partnership, trying to find new instruments to fund this new economy that we hope will happen in an accelerated pace. We are also working in the access of bioeconomy, as I said, also in the resilient infrastructure, in a sustainable infrastructure. Brazil is a developing country that requires great investment in the area of infrastructure, both in urban settings and also in rural and forest areas. We are working with the agenda of technology density, developing country with the comparative advantages that Brazil has, and has to work in its technology and knowledge bases. In this sense, the partnership with developed and prosperous countries, as is the case of the US, is essential for us. In addition to working with new concepts such as the circular economy, the energy transition, our electricity matrix is already 90% clean, but we still have room to grow. And Minister Fernando Haddad has been insisting on that. Brazil not only has already this clean energy basis for our domestic activities, but we can also help in the energy transition of other countries based on the potential of green hydrogen. We don't want green hydrogen to become another commodity. We want to use this type of energy to transform our raw materials, creating new products and materials that Brazil has everything it takes to do that. Minister Fernando Haddad also made a very interesting effort. We used to have the climate fund with 600 million, by raising more funds. Now we have a 10 billion fund, and we can reach a level of 20 billion fund. And our minister, together with the Ministry of the Environment and other multilateral entities, we are trying to find mechanisms to remove, for example, the foreign exchange risks, to be able to encourage more and more investments according to the Brazilian reality. This means that we are working so that in the G20 we can introduce these new topics that align us with what was approved in Dubai. In Dubai, some very important issues were tackled: the challenges of implementation, the challenges of repairing losses from the past, and something that seemed impossible From the countries that explore oil, there we started planning our transition for clean energy, something that we must do more and more, so that the global energy matrix become cleaner, renewable, and safe. In this sense, we already have several programs. The low carbon agriculture program that is being promoted by our Ministry of the Agriculture, Resilient Cities program that is being developed together with the Ministry of Cities, measures that we are implementing in the area of sustainable infrastructure with the Ministry of Transportation, in the social environmental agenda with President Lula committing to pay back our historical debts, as that we mentioned previously, by segments that were historically put at the margins, left at the margins, people that live with vulnerabilities. So this is the idea of a new prosperity cycle where our comparative advantages are no longer seen as competitive advantages only. What we are going to do from now on, considering what happened during the pandemic, considering the challenge of climate change, this is the effort to put together all of our comparative advantages and work in the field of collaboration. Instead of competitive advantages, collaborative advantages. Brazil may be a great supplier of food products, but we have to reduce the emission of CO2 under the risk of our forest becoming savanna. If our forest becomes savanna, we will no longer be the great power that we have. We will not be an agriculture power if that happens. So this is a cooperation effort. There are no longer the logic of negative externalities. Either we create positive externalities or we will not fulfill our mission. Thank you, Mrs. Minister.
Our last round of questions, and I would like to bring the conversation into the realm of the Brazil-US relations. And I would like to ask you, how can Brazil benefit from the clean energy and manufacturing investments of US companies?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, as we've been discussing, the energy transition is going to require an absolutely massive build-out of infrastructure and manufacturing capacity, and there will be new opportunities in Brazil and in the United States for trade and investment in the relevant expertise, tools, and technology that relate to the green energy transition. According to one recent estimate, there will be over $3 trillion in global investment opportunities associated with the transition to net zero each year between now and 2050. So there are massive opportunities here, and we expect you to discuss positive spillovers. Well, we expect that as we invest in the United States and elsewhere, the costs of technology will be driven down by these investments, and that will enable it to scale up even faster, becoming more competitive with fossil fuels. With respect to Brazil directly, as part of the Biden administration's Clean Energy Supply Chain Initiative, Treasury announced at COP28 a $568 million loan to the Clean Technology Fund, and we would encourage American businesses to use these funds to bolster clean energy supply chains here in Brazil. Finally, as you mentioned, there are many programs the Lula administration has launched to foster investment in clean energy. And I think there's a large role for AmCham here to educate US companies about the opportunities that these Brazilian government investments are creating.
Thank you. We'll certainly do that. Ministra, também uma última pergunta. Também
Mr.
em
Minister,
relação
Minister,
ao
last
espectro
question
bilateral
about the
entre Brasil e
bilateral
Estados Unidos
spectrum of our
podem
relationships.
trabalhar
How can
mais
Brazil and
juntos,
United States work together
G20, na
in the
preparação para a
G20, in the
COP30,
preparation
para
for
assegurar que os
COP30, to
futuros
make sure that
compromissos
our
nacionais de cada
future,
país,
the
as
future
NDCs, vão estar
the future
alinhadas
national
a
commitments
1,5
of each
grau,
country
como
will
foi
be aligned
acordado
with the 1.5
novamente na
degree
COP
limit
28 em
as
Dubai.
it was agreed in COP28 in Dubai.
Acho que
Well,
os nossos
I think that our
países,
countries
têm que estar alinhados
have to
e trabalhar
work
juntos,
aligned and together
em razão de algumas questões que são muito importantes.
based on some
delas,
issues that are
esse é o
extremely
fato de
important. The
sermos
first of them
as
is the
duas
fact that we are
maiores
the
democracias
two
ocidentais,
largest
vivendo
democracies in
desafios
the
enormes de estabilizar
in the
essa
West
democracia
and
sem
the
ter todo o
challenges to
investimento
make these
econômico,
democracies
investimento climático
democracies
e
stable,
social,
without which
na minha
all
perspectiva,
these
fica
social
prejudicado.
and
Então, essa ajuda
environmental
mútua, de
economies are
solidariedade,
damaged. So this
com
mutual
resultados que também atentam às
solidarity
necessidades
with
das
results
pessoas
that
em
will
todos
meet
os
people's
setores
needs in
é
all
fundamental.
sectors is
Uma outra
essential.
questão é a
Another
clareza de que
issue
somos
is the
grandes
clarity
emissores de
that
CO2.
we are
debate
big
econômico
emitters
passa
of CO2.
necessariamente
The economic
pelo
debate
enfrentamento da
has to
mudança
do
climática,
necessarily
ou
with
enfrentamos
fighting
ou
climate
não
change.
sabemos
Either we do
aonde
it
vamos
or we
chegar.
don't know where we are going.
O maior emissor de CO2, todo
The
mundo
largest
sabe, é a China, o
emitter of
segundo,
CO2
Estados
is
Unidos,
China,
o Brasil
second is
ocupa
the
a
United
sexta
States, Brazil
posição
ranks
em termos de
sixth
emissão de
in
CO2,
terms of
tendo no
emission of
desmatamento
CO2,
o seu maior
and
vetor.
deforestation
Então, ter
is
essa
the
clareza,
greatest
não
factor
negar o
for that.
problema e enfrentar
So
o
we must
problema
have
como
this
fez o
clear
presidente
and
Lula,
face the
dizendo na
problem, as
COP28 que
President
as
Lula
nossas
did,
economias
saying in
tinham que sair da
COP28,
dependência
saying
do uso
that
de combustível
our
fóssil.
economies should no
Depois
longer
de
depend
31
on
anos da Rio
fossil fuels.
92,
After
nós
30 years of
conseguimos
Rio
sair dali
92,
com uma resolução
we
da
finally established a
transição para o fim.
resolution to
Claro,
this
que
final part
com a
of the
clareza de que
transition.
países
Of
mais
course,
desenvolvidos, os
having it
desenvolvidos
clear
estão
that
na
we
dianteira,
have
acelerando esse
more
processo.
developed countries
Países em
leading this way,
desenvolvimento em seguida,
developing countries
inclusive, na minha
follow the
perspectiva
path,
também,
and from
fazendo
my
uma
point of view,
diferenciação entre
making a
nós, países em
differentiation
desenvolvimento.
between us,
Aqueles
developing
que podem mais
countries,
devem fazer mais,
and those who
né?
can do
E se
more.
perfilar,
Those who can do
inclusive, na
more
ajuda a
should do
países que
more.
têm menos
And
condições.
also aiding countries
O
that
alinhamento
don't
das
have
nossas
so many
NDCs com a
conditions.
missão
The alignment
1.5
of our
é um
NDCs
esforço
with the
muito
1.5
grande, mas a
mission
gente já tá
is a
vendo
great
algumas
effort.
coisas que estamos
But we are
trabalhando
already
juntos,
seeing
né?
results of our common
Agora o
work.
presidente
Recently,
Biden
now
anunciou
President
a
Biden
suspensão,
announced the
da
suspension
exportação
of
de
the
gás, que havia
of
aumentado nos
exporting
Estados Unidos
gases, which had
significativamente.
increased
Isso é uma
previously.
colaboração
This is a
corajosa no
courageous, a
sentido de enfrentar
brave
o problema
initiative
da
in
mudança
the
climática,
sense of
mesmo
facing
em
the
meio
problem
às
of climate
dificuldades
change,
políticas e
even amidst
econômicas que isso
political
suscita.
economic
O presidente
difficulties
Lula
that
fez
may
um movimento
arise. President
parecido
Lula
quando disse que
also
nós
made a
vamos
similar
alcançar
movement,
desmatamento
saying that
zero.
we are going to reach
Até porque
zero
nós
deforestation,
não precisamos
because we
desmatar
don't need
para
to
poder ser
cut
uma
down
potência
trees
agrícola.
in order to
Nós
become an
podemos
agricultural
aumentar a
power.
produção por
We
ganho
can
de
improve
produtividade.
our
Nós temos
production through
tecnologia.
productivity
Nós temos
gains.
que
We have
fazer a
technology.
competição
We must
possível,
make
pelo caminho de cima,
competition
aumentando a
possible,
régua para que nossos
raising the
investimentos
bar so that
sejam
our investments
duradouros. Então,
are
acho que
long-lasting.
esses dois
So these two
exemplos, né, o
examples,
gás nos Estados Unidos,
gas in the United
desmatamento no
States and
Brasil, é
deforestation
algo
in
que
Brazil,
mostra como
they
essa
show
parceria
how this
não é
partnership
apenas
is
um
not
discurso
only
político, ela
a
está
political
acontecendo no
speech,
fazer
it's really
dos dois
happening
países.
in
E
both
uma
countries'
coisa
actions,
importante
through
que nós
both
temos que
countries' actions.
considerar.
Something else that is also important. We are living in a context of
Com
war,
perdas terríveis
with terrible
do ponto de
losses
vista humanitário,
from the
do ponto de vista
humanitarian
ético,
point of view, from the
político,
ethical,
social,
political,
econômico.
socio-economical point of view. This is, we become speechless in face of what's happening around the world. And of course, that all of us, we wish for the peace. But in the context of climate change, we cannot forget, we cannot deny the fact that we can have big instabilities if we do not solve climate changes. One of the vectors of instability if we are not able to supply food at accessible prices to all the population around the world. And in this sense, Brazil is a country that can help in this equation, as I said previously, as long as the world reduces the emissions of fossil fuels, that we do our homework in order to avoid us to become, well, it seems crazy what I'm going to say, but in Brazilian, in order to avoid becoming a desert. We had recently identified the certification already in Brazil, the expansion of the areas of low humidity in different regions of our country, meaning that for Brazil to continue to help in terms of the food insecurity around the planet, we must do our homework in terms of the climate. And as our dear Secretary said, we have this possibility. Another point, in addition to the geopolitical stability based on food security, we also have another problem, which is the issue of the risk of global inflation that may be caused by food insecurity based on climate change. Usually, we fast associate the risk of inflation, risk of instability, geopolitical risk associated to energy. But let's also remember that this risk is even greater in terms of food security. So each economy should get more committed with the fate of humankind. And this is the space of partnerships that we are building together. And President Biden and President Lula, in their meeting, they made a point of reinforcing that. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope that this spirit will inspire us even more along this year. And with that, I want to thank you, Minister Marina, Secretary Yellen. We will continue with the next panel. Please, let's continue with our event. Thank you.